Let me pray. I want to begin. Lord, we just say thank you for your story that you have written and that you are bringing to pass here. Thank you for your story. It's what you've been doing, what you have done. We glorify you. And I just ask that you would give me voice to speak, grace, voice to speak. We commit this to you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you. Part 9. When I started this, I had no idea we would find ourselves here, 9 sessions and several of them 2-hour plus. So I'm amazed, actually. And so I'm probably going to try and cover too much tonight, but I do think it needs to come to a conclusion. So this is part 9. I want to read this. On June 29th, 1787, Benjamin Franklin, who was 81 years old and in poor health, called the Constitutional Convention to prayer. When they were on the brink of breaking up, he declared, "I've lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of the truth that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this." And then concluded with, "And I also believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the building of Babel." I certainly agree. I've included the rest of Psalm 127. He was quoting part of 127:1, and it's, "Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain." It is my contention that an interpretation that God from the very beginning, from the day one of New Covenant, he had intentions, he had purposes, he had very specific plans, that we were not just a local church that just had a whole series of events, maybe like Little House on the Prairie that had many episodes and some connected together and others not really connected. You had the same characters, but the stories weren't connected together at all. Sometimes they had several stories together. That's not how I see. Having the opportunity to go through this, I'll say, exercise, it has made it far more clear to me that no, from the very beginning, God had intentions and purposes, and this story is a continuing story. Sometimes it's easy to see it's continuing now. Sometimes it's harder to see. Now, how did this exactly relate? So from day one, I believe God's purpose is that we would be here. We would be here today, meaning, yes, in this room, but today, in this point in time, this is where we would be as a congregation, preparing ourselves to step into what I believe is the greatest opportunity of our lifetimes. And it's been his intention from the very beginning. And unless he guards it and keeps it and builds it, it will not persist. So, I've entitled this, "Everything's Under Attack." Everything. It was contested. There was pressure. So this, I'm going to pick up a little bit from where I left off last time, but this time period, 2011 till now, these 4 years have been incredible years. Everything under attack. I mean by that contested, by the kingdom of darkness. It's contested. What the purposes were. They weren't just a series of random attacks that just came. They had purpose behind them, intentionality. They involved myself. They involved the congregation. They involved the end-time Cloval Harvest, us functioning as forerunners. It involved the host of congregation prophecies. It involved the property. It involved Russia completing the assignment. It involved Israel completing the assignment. All of them suffered attack. 2011 arrives. It was a dark and discouraging time. People were leaving. It was about to get considerably worse. Now, I know I'm causing you all kinds of joy at the moment, but we've gone through that time period. So, a 40-day fast, it came to me. We're desperate. It's hard to replay. Faye can do a much better job of replaying the feelings of what it felt like at that point in time, and the terror, the wondering, are we even going to make it? I remember thinking during that time period, I never thought before 30 years, so we were 30 years old approximately at that time period. I never thought in the previous 30 years, I wonder if we're going to make it as a congregation. That never occurred to me during this time period, during some of the darkest days. I wondered, God, are we going to continue? Called a 40-day fast. It was May 31st to July 10th, 2011. It was a fast focusing on, help, Lord. What do you want us to do? We need rescuing. Like use some of the Old Testament stories where they were surrounded by an enemy and they were threatened to the gills and they didn't know what to do. The contesting intensifies. At day 22 of the fast, so we're on the fast. And at day 22 of the 40-day fast, which was to cry out to the Lord, help, Lord, there's an enemy out here, the NCF wood sign splits in two. We had a fierce horizontal windstorm that came across the front of the property, did not hit the electric sign, so to speak. There were two big maple trees in the front yard of the White House next to our property. One of the trees was upended level. The other, it appeared, wasn't even touched. There were a few leaves. It was a very localized, very specific, horizontal, not like a tornado. It was like horizontal wind. Went around that house, that White House, and knocked down I don't know how many trees in the backyard of the house next to us. Our neighbor was helpless. That was one of the things we did during the fast is we cut up and all of those trees that were down and cleared his property for him just because it seemed a good thing to do. It was unbelievable. I do realize that a number of the things I'll say tonight, it's one of the blessings of pastoring a revelatory congregation is they're revelatory people. One of the things I've discovered through the years that revelatory people have very different ideas of what things mean, what dreams mean, what signs mean, what wonders mean. And I mean, we just really have really different ideas. Sometimes we get in a group and somebody tells a dream and I hear people interpret it and I think, wow, that's not how I would interpret that dream at all. And you teach people, as I have done, that life is like a dream. And sometimes you're able to interpret the phenomena that happen in life, the actual events, if you would look at it like, if this were a dream, how would I interpret the dream to apply those same rules, those same guidelines? So this was certainly one of them. I heard some really, so I'll show it to you. So this is the entrance island. Not exactly as it is right at the moment because it's a new pillar, but that story comes in just a moment. But it's New Covenant Fellowship, and that's taken from the perspective of where the electric sign is that says New Covenant Fellowship. And this is the sign. This is an actual picture. It's a little fuzzy, I'm sorry, that shows the top half of the sign that said New Covenant, and it's like it was split in a straight line, and on the bottom it says Fellowship. I had some people tell me, well, God was trying to tell us we didn't have enough fellowship among us, and that's why the sign got cut that way. That he was trying to emphasize to us fellowship. I've heard a variety of others. What did it mean? It was troubling to me. Our sign got cut in half. How did that happen? Well, the biology of it is the kind of wood that sign is made out of is straight grain wood, and the grains were running in the direction that the words were, mahogany. So it's a very understandable that wind shear, because the bottom part of the sign is held by the two posts. The bottom part was rigid by virtue of those posts, but just above that is where it's split right on one of the grains, but it's a straight line mahogany grain. It's somewhat understand. So there was a fierce wind pressure that busted that thing right at that point. Okay, the sign. What does it mean? because I'm looking at these events the whole night as it's all part of one story, God's intention from day one. So I think, for me, you have to look at it as far away as possible. Instead of a microscopic view, that you have to have more of a macroscopic view of what's the calling, and take things at a bigger glance rather than a small, narrow glance. And so the sign, New Covenant Fellowship, it's our name. It's how we are identified. It was split in half tumbled down to the ground. It's how we are known. We are known as New Covenant Fellowship, New Covenant. Mainly, at least what I hear, is from New Covenant. We're from New Covenant. Oh, those are people from New Covenant. That's what it was. It's how we are referred to. We're referred to as New Covenant. It's how we are addressed. It was split and it was on the ground. It goes on. On August the 19th, all day, I'll come back to it, at August the 19th, at day 40 after the fast, Pastor Russ falls on his head from a trailer at the church. We were painting the sanctuary. I was painting up on the front. There's just a little area, but it was between their panels. If you remember the sound panels we had, that was kind of meticulous painting, and I didn't mind meticulous painting at all, and I'll do that. You don't get a lot done in a time period, but, I didn't mind that at all. Spent most of the day doing that. I did have to sit down during that part of that process because my heart felt real funny. And I wondered, oh my goodness, am I having heart difficulty? I had already had previous open heart surgery back in 2003. This was 2011. And I seemed to recover, and late in the afternoon, 3:30-ish, 4 o'clock-ish, I looked out the window and I saw one of our couples shoveling the, mulch, shoveling mulch, and they were actually using my car and my trailer, so I thought, hey, I'll just go out and help them. Because they'd been at it all day. It was their final place. There's a number of places they put mulch down. So I went out and got up in the trailer, and it was mulch. It wasn't clay. It wasn't wet. It was real dry. It wasn't heavy digging. It wasn't any of that. And they had a real small wheelbarrow. David Sweeney was whose wheelbarrow. It was he and his wheelbarrow. And so I filled several times the wheelbarrow, shoveled several times. And it was on the third time that I was shoveling, and that's the last I remember. I remember putting the shovel on the trailer, and that was back in 2011, and I don't remember anymore. What people tell me was that I backed up, my legs hit the trailer, and I pirouetted backwards. I fell backwards on my head straight on the asphalt. I didn't hit the tongue of the trailer. There were no bruises anywhere. I just landed straight on my head and was knocked out. And I don't know how long I was out. I came to, and then those helping me did the worst thing in the world they could have done. They picked me up and they were trying to carry me into the building because it was hot outside. And that's what you don't do with someone who's had a head injury. And it was good-hearted. Their intentions were to help me. All of us couldn't believe it. I fell on my head from the trailer at the church. I could not believe it. I remember when I came to, I sat there, blood all over. Head wounds bleed a lot. I can't believe it. I can't believe I don't know how I fell. I don't know how that happened. Because I was working at the church on a church project on the church property, workers' compensation, became a part of it. And I was out for 5 months, I think 5 months and a week. That was hard on the congregation. There were people who left. That was hard. I acknowledge that was hard. I had various pastors from the city come, people in the congregation, various pastors from the city. It was a difficult time. Unexplained fall on my head on asphalt. I had a brainstem injury. I was told by 2 doctors I should have died. I should be dead. Because people die from brainstem injuries, the kind that I had. I damaged the vestibular canal behind my right ear. I was told people normally die from such an injury, told I should have died. I believe the intention was to take my life. to remove my leadership away from further involvement in NCF's assignments. I believe that was the intention. It was intentional. At day 68 after the fast, at day 40 after the fast is when I fell. At day 22 during the fast is when the sign that has our name on it was split in two. At day 68 after the fast, the stone memorial, the pillar out front, was crushed. Remember when we purchased the property, there were 7.7 acres. We paid $70,000 for it. And after all the money was in, Vicki counted up the number of giving units, and there were 77. And so over the course of time, we built a memorial pillar out in the entrance island that had 77 stones in it because they represented the 77 giving units that God gave. The pillar was a declaration. This is the property God picked. His hand is on it. He picked it. He picked the number of people who were going to contribute to it. He was over all of it, the land. The sign, I believe, referred to the congregation. Myself, I believe, was the pastor, the leader. So here's the stone pillar prior to it being dismantled. And again, this is a real picture. It's not real clear. This is what was left when a semi guy pulled into the property, as I understand, pulled in from the railroad end coming this way, and he was going to turn around in our property, one of those big semis, and the back wheels rolled over the top of the pillar and just crushed it. It was a mess. So, and now the property. What was going on? I believe the congregation was attacked. What represented the congregation, our name, how we're identified, its purposes. Underneath it was why God called us into being. The property, God picked it. The pastoral leadership, God picked it. All of them were contested significantly. There is a process that I believe in the Scripture. I'm not the originator of it, the birth, death, and supernatural fulfillment of a vision. It's a process that I've taught on a number of occasions, though it's been several years since I've taught it. It's not my intention to teach it tonight. But you see a pattern in Scripture where Joseph is a classic example. Vision is birthed. Vision is birthed through dreams, through favor, through the coat given to him by his father, through the two dreams that he tells us about and told his family about. And the vision was birthed. It was a process. He developed, his character developed, his brothers were offended, angry, furious at the calling that it seemed was on him, and that everybody, including his father and mother, were going to bow down, though his birth mother was dead by this time. She died at his childbirth. And he went into Egypt and had great favor, but he was a prisoner in a foreign land. And then he was falsely accused, and if it didn't seem like it died then, it certainly died when he was then put in the Pharaoh's prison and was there for several years. That had to be a horrible place. And yet God's favor was with him there. And it was in there that he interpreted dreams and he came out. And there was a supernatural fulfillment of the calling that was on his life. You could say that regarding Jesus. The vision was birthed. He was the Christ. He was the Messiah. He lived 30 years. He stepped into his ministry when he was 30. He had signs and wonders. When John the Baptist asked, are you the Christ? His answer was, you've seen the dead raised. You've seen the people healed. You've seen the blind see. You've seen the lame healed. That's what the promises were. But then he was crucified. And those following him, that seeming death of a vision. They were looking for a military commander to lead them against Rome and to supremacy, military supremacy. and it was supernaturally fulfilled, the resurrection. It was all God's plan. That's a story. When you have enough of the story of people, you see that cycle where vision is birthed, it is contested, and it appears in the natural realm to die. And if it's something God's called into being, then it supernaturally is made possible for it to come to pass. I believe that process has been at work. It's much easier to teach the theology of that than to live the practice of that. We can say yes and amen when we see examples of the theology of it in Scripture, but when we kind of look at our own lives and think, this is what it feels like? Do you think this is what it could be? Oh my goodness. The land memorial. It was a land chosen and provided for by God, for a house of God. It was now challenged. It was smashed and it was all over the ground. I believe in the biggest picture, it was God's call on this property, its purpose, challenged. God's call on His purpose for this congregation, the sign, new covenant, the part that we are generally referred to as split right in two and down on the ground. The pastor on the ground, the pastor on the ground, the sign on the ground, the pillar on the ground. It's like, it's obvious. It's just obvious. Smashed and on the ground. Within the same time period, one during the 40-day fast and the other following it. It was an incredible time. There was another part. It was a little bit longer. It was in 2012, the global army arising. Pastor Russ was out for 5 months. So that's the rest of 2011 and January of 2012. During that time period, Faye had, with several ladies, had gone to a Katie Sousa conference. We had gotten Katie Sousa materials and we were soaking Wednesday night classes, Wednesday night soaking times. It was beginning. We were soaking because of what we had learned. We were soaking because, in a sense, in preparation for inviting Katie Sousa to come here, soaking because it was a truth that everybody should be aware of, and we were just trying to apply it and walk in it, practice it, benefit from it. Soaking in preparation for the first Katie Sousa conference. It was set for September 21, 22 of 2012. They called it the Global Army Arising. That was fascinating to us in that they chose that title. I don't think we were using those words at all at that time period, but they chose it. I believe to really understand that accident, that horrific accident that took place. I think the title is the key. What was under attack was the assignment that we as a congregation from day one, sands of time, enlistment papers, was to be involved in the global end time harvest. That was under attack. It's my opinion that to understand that accident, you have to look at it from its name. What was it called? What was its title? The Global Army Arriving. Gary Beaton was the transportation, and he had 2 prompts. We've talked several times about these prompts. Just a day or two before that, the water pressure in his house went out or went down to half, and he and his wife went out to their water meter because he thought, well, maybe it's a water meter problem. And he lifted the lid off of the water meter, and he said on the bottom side of the lid was the largest black widow spider he'd ever seen in his life. He immediately interpreted it, okay, this is an assignment. This is an assignment against my life. He killed the black widow spider and canceled the assignment, prayed against it, interceded against what that possibly meant. There was a second event. This is not a very good picture. This is Dallas, Texas. X is the spot where Kennedy was shot. In the building in the background, there's 2 buildings. There's one on the right. There's the one that's slightly on the left, and you see, in essence, the whole building. If you look in the upper right-hand corner where the arrow is pointing, you may or may not be able to see the white circle. That's the window where supposedly Kennedy was shot, the rifle that shot him, probably rifles, but we won't get into that. And during that time period, in just the time period immediately preceding Gary going and picking up Katie Sousa and her traveling companion Amy, he had someone contact him. And this photo was a part of all of that information. He also had spoken on a Wednesday night, not many weeks prior to this, and he gave his first public airing of the story behind the Harbinger and what took place on Jekyll Island. And 3 days on the 17th of the month, prior to the 20th when the accident happened, was the first posting of the story behind the Harbinger, the untold story behind the Harbinger. And Gary, I think, rightly believes that that was a part of it also. Both he and Katie had the blood of Jesus Christ focused ministries. Gary, intercession. Katie, being cleansed. So the global army of writing, 6 months of soaking, first Katie Sousa conference, Gary, Katie, and Amy were in a T-bone accident on the way home from the airport, right in front of the Kia dealership. They were released and sent home. They were told all three were going to have to be admitted. Katie thought she was dying. She probably was. She was on the ground, laying on the ground out of the car. Amy, it was impossible to get her out. She probably had a broken leg that got healed on the spot. It was awful. I remember Gary called me and, "Come on, Gary, stop kidding me. Katie's on the ground screaming, 'I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe.' Amy can't get out of the car." Gary, come on. It's not the time to joke. I'm not joking, Russ. We were in this terrible accident. We're on our way to UT Hospital. I called Vicky, and Vicky said the same thing. "Russ, it's not the time to kid." "Vicky, I'm not kidding. Meet us at UT Hospital emergency room. We got all three passengers really beat up." I'd never even heard of it. The realm of pride is such an easy realm to live in, stay in, touch, nudge. Its tentacles will try and grip you all the time. I do believe the invitation that has been given to us is an incredible end-time participant. It's an incredible opportunity. It will draw incredible contesting. Killed in action. Global army arising. The Kia dealership, a truck came out right beside it. It came out, there was a big truck pulling off. They were passing this bigger truck. There was a pickup truck that couldn't see and pulled out right in front of the big truck that was turning right beside where he was, came right in the middle, and Gary T-boned the guy. There's nothing he could do. So it was a night accident. There's a nighttime picture of it. It was a mess. There's a daytime picture of his car. The meaning of this accident, it's an attempt to stop the global army from arising. The spiritual warfare against all killed in action. An assassination attempt against all three, Katie, Amy, and Gary. Now, part of the untold story and us. You have no idea the legal issues that arise from an accident like that. I had no idea. The lost revenue that Expected End Ministries experienced because Katie couldn't do conferences. Lawyers, insurance policies, conversations. You had no idea how many conversations, legal suits, fears. I quickly realized we all are being tested in this. Katie was, Amy was, Expected End Ministries was, Gary was, New Covenant was. We thought this is a piece of cake because we have quite a large rider on our insurance policy that we thought it's going to cover anything and everything. And I told Katie and Amy and Gary that night in the emergency room at UT Hospital. Don't worry, gang, this is going to be covered because of our... Then we discovered in the days that followed that there's a small clause, if the driver is driving their own personal car, it does not apply. We were shocked. We were being tested severely. There was another time we were tested severely over missions. I'd seen this before. As a part of moving forward was the ability to deal with integrity, to be honorable in all that you do, to treat everybody justly and fairly, to not just try and protect your own skin, but to be just in all of your dealings. Very few people, Vicki is well aware of those stories. All three of those Expected End Ministries are very aware of unbelievable number of contacts. What followed that? Our hearts were being tested. It was all part of the contesting. The man in the truck who caused the accident had minimal insurance. There were token encouragements. At that time period, and again, the bigger picture, it's the whole thing. It's the congregation. It's the property that God picked and said, in essence, this is mine. The congregation, I have called you into being for a global end-time purpose. It's the pastor. I just knew I had a call to pastor, and there wasn't going to be an opportunity in the church that I was in, and waited till a new pastor came, and then we were going to start a church that liked family. That's where we started. There were token encouragements, confirmations of the callings, and that the assignments had not been lost. I sure did wonder, as a result of all those things, my goodness, God, who's doing this? I didn't believe the falling on my head and injuring my brainstem was the blessing of God. Well, there's an enemy. I didn't believe a truck rolling over the pillar out there and dismantling it was a blessing of God. I didn't believe the splitting of the sign was the blessing of God. Have we messed up? Are we so filled with strife? Are we so filled with... Did you bring the Katie Sousa stuff because there was so much that needed to be cleaned out? Have we messed up? Have we just... I asked that about myself. I asked that when I had open heart surgery. God, am I done? Is my run over? It's been a good run. I've enjoyed it. But is it done? Is that what this means? And then we've told some of the stories that took place. Happened again here. Is it done? I don't even know how I fell. I don't even know why I fell. Why did I back up? Why did I fall? Why did I pirouette? I've had people tell me they're convinced I was pushed. Well, it had to be in the spirit realm. If it was, there wasn't anybody else on the trailer. It was just me in the natural on the trailer. But there were some small encouragements. They were followed up by stunning declarations. But the small encouragements first. On 7/13, at the third day after the fast, a piece of my staff was returned. I showed that to you last week. It was 5 years. In and of itself, it had some words on it. I didn't know anything remained of that. It was encouraging to me. It was just a small piece, by itself meaningless. But it was an encouragement. On July 25th, 2011, a regathering of those named, the 11 people plus the 12th that came from Debbie's dream of those with the faith to raise the dead. They gathered on July 25th, 2011. It was the 50th anniversary of the Tommy Hicks vision. That was relating to the end-time army. See, that's right in New Covenant's territory. What I didn't say is New Covenant owns Tommy Hicks' end-time vision. I didn't say that. But the end-time army arising is very much a part of why God brought us into being. So it was incredibly significant that the 50th anniversary, the Jubilee, occurred during that time period. It was of note, and it was encouraging to me, a small encouragement. The sign, we took the sign down, it was glued, it was pegged, it didn't have pegs before, so Bob Jepp, who made the sign in the first place, pegged it, that means drill hole, put small pegs in there, glued it, strengthened it. We discovered that the posts holding the sign up, one of the posts was completely rotten. It was just free floating down there at the bottom of the post. And we realized, I called Gene Beffrey, say, Gene, come, I want your opinion on this post. He did a little bit, and he said, this post is really in bad condition. Broke it completely and got it out. I said, well, I guess we got to replace that post. Thank you, Gene. So we dug out the foundation for that. We dug the other post up. Said, well, that one's bad. This one's on the way of being bad. Now, they were out of mahogany, supposed to be able to withstand that. It was completely rotted in two, one post. So we remade the posts, pressure-treated wood, strengthened, pegged, re-glued it, put it back together again. Well, that was a minor encouragement. That's not a spiritual, stunning declaration from God. That was just a natural acting of putting the sign back together again. But that was a good thing to do. Someone passing by took all the information. They saw the truck, the semi, sitting on the entrance, that pillar. And so we had a lot of the driver, just stuff happens when people cause things. They don't report stuff. Stuff happens. But we had information, we had truck numbers, we had license number, we had all of that, and yes, it was that truck and it was that driver. And it was interesting to us that the insurance ticket on that deal was 448888. That just caught my attention. Because of numbers and how God has used numbers with New Covenant, I just have accepted. It's part of the language system God's going to use with us. So pay attention. Be encouraged by it. It was 88448888. The pillar was rebuilt we did a whole new foundation. It was rebuilt and rededicated. Those were minor encouragements. Late summer of that year, Glenn Reevely came to me, and he told me, we had lunch, and he told me, remember way back in 1995, during the first year, during the early part of renewal, remember late one night you and I were there? Yep, I'll never forget that night. And you remember you were doing a whole bunch of crunches. I just will say that. I gave some explanation, a number of parts back. Yep, I said, I remember. He said, I counted them. I didn't know that. He said, well, there were 92 of them. Really? And he said, you did a number of them, and then you stopped. And then you started again, and then you stopped. And then you started again until you were finished. And he said, what came to me at that time is that you were going to have two very close calls. And you would survive them. And as best I can tell, you're going to live to at least 92. And you're waiting till now to tell me this? Interesting, if you count, the event happened in 1995. I had open heart surgery in 2003. They told me I should have had a heart attack, and if I'd had it, I would have died because of the blockage. It was emergency. I've told that story. 8 years, that was 8 years after 95, 8 years, comes the first incident. I needed open heart surgery. 8 years passed, and the second incident, 2011, as I fall on my head, injure my brainstem and should be dead. Twice, sovereignly alive. It was incredibly encouraging to me. November 18th, 2011, Faye and I and Vicki took a prayer journey. We heard about Southwest Point down in Kingston, Tennessee, down in Kingston, Tennessee. That it was a prayer center, and it's a place that's been one of the few places in the United States that's identified as a place where it has unusual activity. And a lot of people go there. Some you'd be buddy-buddy with, some you wouldn't be buddy-buddy with. There was a man, David Barkley, who was a regular attender of renewal services here, who was starting a church down in Kingston. And he would go to Southwest Point a lot and just pray there, because he just said, I just sense the Lord a lot. So on the day that Faye and Vicki and I went, it was during the recovery time period, and Vicki asked if I wanted to go out and just go for a drive, and she suggested that. So we actually had James and Debbie Anderson, who took us the week before down to a gathering that was at Southwest Point. And David Barkley and a few people, they were considering starting a church. And we got introduced, and I felt like, well, if we're going to pray, we need to come when we're more by ourselves, because there wasn't any by ourselves. So we talked Vicki into going sometime that week or the week after that. And we got out of the car, and you can walk straight up the hill, but because I wasn't doing that at that point in time, there's a long, curvy asphalt walkway that goes to the fort, what remains of the fort at Southwest Point. The gate that we went through happened to be called the Eastern Gate. That just caught my attention. Well, that's interesting, the Eastern Gate. That's a pretty important gate in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. And when we walked into the compound, it's a pretty big area. We walked into the compound, we could see there's several cabins, but there's a cabin, a pronounced cabin, off to the left, and we saw that there was an individual just kind of sitting on the front porch. So we spent time going to different areas and just praying. We were just praying. And Vicki kind of recognized the guy and said to herself at some point in time, well, that's David Barkley. So she went up to him eventually, and Faye and I eventually went over there, and he said, something interesting just happened. Okay. He said, I was here, I come a lot to pray. We knew that. We had seen him a week or two before. He said, all of a sudden I started having renewal manifestations, and he said, I couldn't understand why. And I started doing what I did at New Covenant years ago during renewal. He said, and then I saw there were 3 people coming onto the compound, and it coincided. He said, I didn't know who the 3 people were until they got closer. And then he said, I realized, oh, that's Russ and Faye and Vicki from New Covenant, where I went, where these phenomena that he was experiencing, and he hadn't had them in years. So we interpreted that, well, God, that's interesting. That's encouraging. They were minor, but they were encouraging. Realignments were taking place at the same time. In August the 12th of 2011, Paul Bradbury, who'd been our youth pastor for a number of years, 7-8 years, his youth pastorship came to an end. There was a lot of confusion about that, and that's not my purpose to go through that. But there was just a lot of confusion, and it came to an end. There were very different stories that were told. It was a tumultuous time. Many more left NCF. Disappointed, hurt, offended, confused. In December of 2012, December the 9th, Vicki Pettit, Roach now, looked over the finances of NCF and came to the conclusion, because Vicki and I had been here for 30-some years, that the budget just couldn't afford two 30-year employees. And so she felt we had to get a new youth pastor, and so she would ask that we would lay her off. So with great regret, we laid her off. It was not a simple snap decision. Her last formal day of employment was December 9th, 2012. We gave her, it's actually 30 weeks, not 20. Though she worked it was the next 30 weeks of severance because we gave her a severance for each year that she worked. And she chose on her own to work those 30 weeks. And we said, Vicki, you don't have to work. But she worked. I mean, she took a day off here and there, but she essentially worked those 30 weeks because she wasn't mad. She wasn't leaving disgruntled. She was making a decision that she felt was the best for New Covenant. And she was also considering her own life. What's noteworthy to me is in the great focus of the globe on December 21/12, the Mayan calendar probably is the buzzword that people think, oh yeah, I know about the Mayan calendar. No, we probably don't. I've never studied the Mayan calendar, but as that was approaching, I started studying the astronomy. Not the astrology, but the astronomy. And it was fascinating astronomy. About every 26,000 years, there is a particular lineup of the plane of the Earth and the Sun with the plane of the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And it only occurs, a particular crossing of those two planes only occurs once every 26,000 years. And somehow the Mayans had it figured out as well as many places through the passage of time that it was going to occur on December 21st of the year 2012. And they started saying years and years and years ago that everything was going to change. They really didn't say the world was going to pass away, and they were saying that everything's going to change. We don't know what the change is going to result in. You understand, these were the Mayans. And through history, there are many people, occult, non-occult, who prophesied. At the same time, 2 or 3 or 4 years that preceded that, the number of 1111, people started seeing 1111 on their clocks, just everywhere. If you search the web and just put the numbers 1111, you'll run into hundreds of thousands of articles, lots of them from New Age people, asking the question, why does the number of 1111 appear so much? This was all prior to December 21st. Why 1111? I remember real close to the time when December 21, as I said, I never studied the Mayan calendar or any of the occult authors. I just studied the astronomy. And when I came across the fact that the moment, it actually was a 6-month time period because of the distances and what we are working with, the planes. It was a 6-month time period that intersection was going to be taking place, but there was a pivotal minute. And that pivotal minute was 11:11 Greenwich time. I accepted that when I heard that, okay. And what occurred at that moment is the earth was directly lined up behind the sun, and the plane of those two planets intersected the plane of the galaxy, the nucleus of the Milky Way galaxy. And to me, it was obvious. It was so simple, it was obvious. God was giving a galactic message to line up behind the sun, to realign yourself behind the sun, Jesus Christ. And as you're entering into the next years, you must realign into what God's purposes are for you. It was incredibly simple. I mean, you just say it was a stroke of genius. It was beyond genius. And we lived during that time period. Realignments. There were realignments taking place. They were difficult. They weren't anticipated, some of them. They were hard to come to, but we were realigning. Everything had been under attack. Now a realignment and confirmations regarding Pastor Russ, the congregation, the end-time global harvest, The host of congregation prophecies, the property, Russia, Israel. There were stunners. What I've mentioned so far has been, they were nudges, they were encouragements, they were real, they happened. But the sign just had been rebuilt. The pillar had been remade. I recovered. Pastor Russ, so looking at the stunners for me, on February 10th and 11th, 2013, the Katie Sousa Conference, it was finally held. Now, what I've told you is between the accident and between the conference, it was supposed to take place in September, and the conference ended up taking place in February. So during those months, it was unbelievable. The tensions, the warfare, the legalism, the legal stuff. When I say legalism, the legal stuff. It was awful. Even the day of the conference, I didn't know if all the players were going to be present. Stories you don't know. I had no idea. I was encouraging some of the players, come. Everybody was tense. You didn't know it. But you weren't aware of all that took place. What I believe was partly at stake was the global harvest, our participation in it. It was finally held. It was amazing. The first night, about a half hour into the first night, the major players reconciled right there on the front. It was stunning. It was in my heart to raise money. They had given us a sum of money that they lost, 30, 35, 36,000. I don't remember the exact number, something like that. That they had lost as a result of conferences that Katie was not able to do. It just came into my heart that this is not right. In our city, for this to happen in our city, what happened back in September. It's just not right. It was an electric conference. We took an offering. It wasn't mentioned from day one. It was 2 days long. It wasn't mentioned from day one. We took an offering. And altogether, when everything was said, added, and so on, it was about $30,000 that was raised. She was shocked. I went up to her, and I apologized to her. She was standing right about here. And I went up to her, and after Vicki brought me the final number, and I went up to her, I said, Katie, I am so sorry. She said, why? Why are you sorry? Katie, the offering was only $30,000. You needed about 30,000, 36, something like that. She said, $30,000? You're apologizing? And she called for the team. She said, okay, New Covenant team, come up here on the platform. And gave us the seismic prophecy, an epicenter, that this would be an epicenter. She had no idea what she was saying. We passed the test. Thank you. And one of the biggest stunners of my life occurred on April the 18th, 2013. The Katie Sousa Conference, the first one that finally happened, was in February. April the 18th is my birthday. April 18 is a number that God uses to confirm to me. I've told that story. So this is now the 30th anniversary of my father's death. He died on April the 18th. He signed his will on a different April the 18th, my mom told me. On that day, Gary Beaton took me to lunch and we went to Chili's. Without exaggerating, in all the years we've been together, we've had 100 meals at Chili's. And we've sat at the same table, easily 100 meals, and just talked about what God was doing, revelatory things, His life, His assignment, our lives, our assignments. And on that day, he knew it was my birthday, and I said, this is the 30th anniversary of my dad's death. And I forget what number it was of the Doolittle raid. It was the anniversary of the Doolittle raid. It happened at 42. Somebody can figure that out. It was 2013, 60s, I think. And a waiter came up to us and said, "Hi, my name is Chance Jr., and I'm going to take your orders for what you're drinking, but I'm not your server today. Mandy is." Gary and I, Gary's the one who keeps track of everything, takes photos of everything, keeps receipts of everything, so we'd never had that happen before. That's one of the big keys for us that we've both learned, that I've tried to impart. If you have something happens that's never happened before, pay attention. That never happened before. So Chance Jr., wow, that's an interesting name, and we generally have a name book with us. It's one of the ways we open up a conversation for evangelism is we ask them their name, and then we look it up in the name book, and we come back, we tell them what the Christian name book is, and what their name means, and so on. We've had them crying. It's amazing. So we key on names. Chance Jr., where did that name come from? Well, my mother and dad, they saw a movie way back, and one of the main characters was named Chance, and she liked it, so she decided, actually her grandmother, she named her dad Chance. His dad was named Chance, and he was named Chance Jr. Okay, that's interesting. What that meant was, what was about to take place was not by chance. That's what it meant. I mean, God would do something like that? Absolutely. Just pay attention. So up comes Mandy, real bubbly, flashy jewelry, real sanguine, happy, smiling. Hi, I'm Mandy. Great. What does Mandy stand for? Amanda. We never asked her last name. Amanda. That's good. So we chatted with her, and it was nice. It was nothing significant took place. So we had our meal. Gary paid the bill. He took the receipt, which meant he would keep the receipt. I would have thrown the receipt away. So the next day, Gary calls me on the phone. He said, "Russ, you're not going to believe this. Try me, Gary. Do you know what Mandy's last name was?" Nope. We never asked her what her last name was. He said, "Her last name was Doolittle." I said, "You're lying. That is not true." So if you look for yourself at the receipt, if you follow the arrow, if it's clear enough, can you see that the server's last name is Doolittle? You see that it's on April the 18th? Just follow it across. It's on April the 18th. He said, "Her last name is Doolittle." I said, "Gary, come on now. You're saying on my 30th, the 30th anniversary of my dad's death, April 18th, the Doolittle Raiders, that is the reason why I came to understand after hearing Mike Bickle's message at Toronto in 1995. I have a measure of the forerunner spirit. That it was the Doolittle raid on April the 18th, 1942, when I first heard of that. That's what convinced me I had a forerunner spirit, because of the connections that God had made for me on April the 18th, April the 18th, April the 18th. I'd never met a Doolittle. I've read his autobiography. I've read a number of books on the Raiders, and that I've read umpteen internet articles on the Doolittle raid. YouTube's full of them. At that, we talked about the Doolittle raid, Gary and I, because it was also the anniversary day of the Doolittle raid. I'd never met a Doolittle. And on my birthday, on the 30th anniversary of my dad's death, that's when someone stepped into ministry in the Bible. When they were 30, they stepped into the priesthood ministry. On the 30th anniversary of my dad's death, April the 18th, I would meet a Doolittle. I could almost not speak. That doesn't just happen. That's orchestrated. So, Faye and I were out on Saturday, and we ate at the exclusive Golden Arches Emporium on Clinton Highway. And I said, Faye, can we go by Chili's just per chance Mandy is there? I want to find out if she's related to Jimmy Doolittle. Okay, so we go, and I go in and I ask the guy, is Mandy Doolittle here? Yes, she is. Well, can I talk to her for just a minute? So she comes up. I said, Mandy, she says, I remember you. I said, yeah. Are you related to Jimmy Doolittle? Sure am. My husband's a great-great-grandson of Jimmy Doolittle. You're kidding. No? You are related by marriage to Jimmy Doolittle? Did you know that, I think it was Thursday, that Thursday, that was the anniversary? She said, sure, we talked about it. Our son has got an army tank for a bed in his bedroom. You know, it looks like an army tank kind of thing. Why were you there? We've been to Chili's at least 100 times for lunch. We've never seen you. Why were you there? Well, that's interesting. While I was there, I love those stories. How did these things happen? Actually, I work on Thursday nights, but I had something at school with my son, so I had to work during the day, and I normally work the station. I don't work this station over here. We sit at the same table. I've said that. And I normally don't sit there. I don't wait there. I in the center section, but because I changed shifts, that was already covered, so this section was open, so they gave me this section. Really? That's why you were there. Chance. I'm Chance Jr., but I am not your server. Mandy is. I came away from that saying, it's still on. The deal is still on. It's still on. The clock is still ticking. I would have thought through all the stuff we've gone through and all the unhappiness and all of the stunning victories and the terrible losses, it's still going. The clock is still going. Just no way to describe the encouragement that was to me. I'm still in. I use the phrase to Faye, I'm still in the game. I'm still in. I'm not meaning it's a game. I'm still a player on the field. God said, you're still a player. That's how I interpreted that. How we would need that. Doolittle, April the 18th. Mandy Doolittle. That was on Tuesday, and God just wanted to give a little exclamation mark to April the 18th, because sometimes he'll do that. When he's asking you to do something that just stretches everything, he'll work with you. He did it with Gideon. He was asking Gideon to do something pretty undone before. In that fashion, it hadn't been done before. So how about this, let's have just the wool wet and the ground dry. Okay, how about the ground dry and the wool wet? Gary and I were sitting in my office that Wednesday night. He'd brought his daughter to church. This was, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 days after the Mandy Doolittle encounter. And we were just sitting chatting, and Kathy came into our office, and she was all excited. She said, in essence, in my living room, I have one of those Life magazines that, the most 100 significant events that took place over the last 100 years. That kind of a magazine. And I opened it up and I looked, and the Doolittle raid was in it. Really? The Doolittle raid was in it? Yeah. So it was only one column wide. So she had it. I think she had a copy of it, or she had the magazine copy of it, I think. And I said, well, read it. So Gary read it, and he started off, and it was in essence April the 18th, 1943. And I said, whoa. That was not the Doolittle raid. The Doolittle raid was 1942. Pearl Harbor was 41. So she read the article, And the mastermind, Admiral Matsumoto from Japan, was the mastermind of the Pearl Harbor attack. Pardon? Yeah, that's what I said, Yamamoto. Or I was close. He was the architect. Can we take that? He was the architect, and they heard that he was visiting because of the Doolittle raid, everything changed in the Pacific Theater. And Japan, suddenly they were beginning to lose things. By this point in time, they were losing territory, and he decided he would go to the most far-out point island that they still had control over. The American forces had cracked the Japan code even before all of that started. That's why they won the Battle of Midway, because they'd already cracked Japan's code. And this man was a very punctual man, and he was going to be flying into this island, and they decided they would do an impossible mission. They would send 16 planes. Jimmy Doolittle's raiders had 16 planes, 80 men. They would fly 20 to 30 feet over the ocean, just like they did in the Doolittle raid. And they would try and intersect with this man's airplane just before it was landing on this island. And they were counting on he was as punctual as could be. Nowadays, with our GPS, I'm talking about 1943, you have far more sophisticated directional finding stuff in your hand than they had available to them. It was crude compared to what you have in your hand. And it happened. They had developed long-range fighters. These were fighters. And they met, there was, I think, 7 fighters accompanying 2 bombers, and he was on one of those bombers, and they shot him down. They did it. And it happened on April the 18th, 1943. Okay, God, you're wanting me not to lose sight of the significance of April the 18th. So that's me. About the property. God's hand on it. This is mine. The property. The time of the fragrance. The presence of the Lord. Started March the 4th, 2014. Katie Seuss's second conference was that week, March 7th and 8th. She ministered on the Ark of the Covenant. It began. The presence. The fragrances of the Lord. They began. For a year, we were visited in this room. Daily with fragrances, all different kinds of fragrances as time went on. Supernatural. Occasionally they would be downstairs in the hallway. On real remote occasions, people would smell them in various places. But exclusively, almost exclusively, it was this room, this property. God's presence was here in such a profound way. You could smell it. Sometimes it would be like somebody funneling a strong current of fragrance at you. Flowers, cinnamon, wood, burning wood, bouquet of flowers, anointing oil. We still have not heard of one other congregation in the world that had that happen or is having that happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm not saying there aren't meetings where fragrances of heaven are being smelled. Of course there are. But daily for a year, there's not another place that we have heard of yet. I believe God did that in part to say, this is mine. I'm here. I picked this place. It was not the congregation, the pastor, we're all involved, so you can't separate us, but yet you can look at different elements. I remember when I first walked in the room, Otis had come to the church on a Wednesday. It started on a Tuesday. The Wednesday after that, not the next day, but a week and a day, Otis came to use the restroom in the building. He'd been out in North Knoxville somewhere, and they said, hey, have you been up in the sanctuary? Have you smelled the fragrances? No. He's a spiritually minded man, so he came up here, and he was undone. That's a good thing. And he came down, asked if I was here. I was in my office. He came down and said, I want you to go upstairs. I said, okay. So I walked in those back doors, Otis beside me, and I took one whiff, and I said, this smells like applewood. And I said to him, I don't know why I'm saying this, because I don't have any idea what applewood smells like. But this smells like applewood. You know, if Otis had asked me, why are you saying that? I don't know why I'm saying that, but I'm hearing myself say that, but I don't know why I'm saying that, because I've not been around apple orchards or stuff like that. I don't have any idea. But this smells like applewood. For about a half hour, I persisted. We looked up in the Bible verses on apples and how they related. And eventually, Otis said, nah, I've been in Kenya a long time, and this smells like acacia wood. This is acacia wood. I've smelled that in campfires in Kenya a lot. Acacia wood? Yeah, this is acacia wood. Really? Well, the Ark of the Covenant was made out of acacia. And you remember that the last significant message that Katie gave of that week that it started prior to her being here, was on the Ark of the Covenant. Following the Ark of the Covenant, they went into the Promised Land, crossed the Jordan. She had a significant time of soaking that focused on that. So, I don't know, Otis. Yeah, I can smell it. This was within the first week. So I said, hey, how about if you drive, I'll buy. Let's go to the Chicken. That's Chick-fil-A. Let's go to the Chicken. We'll eat lunch. He said, okay. So we went to the Chicken, had lunch. And he said, I have to go to Lowe's. I've got to get something. I assumed he was going to buy a plumbing part or something like that for a repair at the house. Sure, I'll just stay in the car. So he goes into Lowe's. He's looking for acacia wood. I assumed he was just picking up a plumbing part. And he goes to the service desk, or to where contractors go. And do you have any acacia wood? Oh, no, that's an exotic wood. But we have a guru. We got a wood guru. He works down in Tools. You go ask him. So he goes down to Tools. I can't remember the guy's name. And Otis does. You remember his name, Otis?
His name was Scott. He had not to be there this day.
Yeah, no, Scott wasn't there. But they told him, oh, there's another guy who's really good with woods, but maybe not the guru that Scott is, but he's down at the service desk, the other end of Lowe's, and we think he's here today. So Otis goes down there. And he asks who's the second guy?
Stacy. Yeah, he was an assistant manager.
An assistant manager. Is Stacy? Okay, is Stacy here? Well, yeah, he's in the break room in the back. So, well, I'd like to talk to him. So they call Stacy. So Otis is going to the back of the store. Stacy's coming to the front of the store, and they met the right aisle. And yeah, you have any acacia wood? Oh, no, we don't carry any of that here. I don't know how the conversation, but it quickly went that Stacy says, you know, I once wanted to make an exact model of the Ark of the Covenant, and it was made out of acacia wood. And I wanted to make it, so I wanted to make it. The Ark of the Covenant, you wanted to make an exact model of the Ark of the Covenant? Yeah, I tried to make it out of acacia wood, but it's so ferociously expensive I couldn't make it. I made it out of something else. I took several months, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to carve. I didn't know how to do. I didn't know what it looked like. So I would just go down in my shop, and I'd sit and I'd stare for a couple of hours, and then I'd do what came to me. And I said, all this carving, my wife would ask me, where did you learn to carve? I don't know. I didn't learn to carve. I just started carving. And here's this, he's got a picture of it. I got a picture. He showed him a picture of this ark that he had made. It's a full-scale model. Elaborate wood carving. You made this, the Ark of the Covenant? You know, this is the assistant manager of Lowe's. That's just to expect, you know, that's who you would expect to have handcrafted an Ark of the Covenant. When you're out looking for acacia wood, I didn't know he was doing that. So he came back out to the car and told me this story. Oh, this. It happened. He said, it just happened. Where's the picture? Well, I didn't ask him for a picture. Go get a picture. So he goes back in the store. The guy had a picture on his phone. He sent a picture to Otis, so Otis got a picture of it. I got a picture of it. What are the odds? Now, you let this impact you to the place where you're willing to make decisions. Or you just let it roll off. That's interesting. That's pretty cool. Okay. Next chapter of Little House on the Prairie. So he said there's a store out in Knoxville on Kingston Pike that sells exotic woods. Probably if I were to find any acacia wood in Knoxville, that's where I'd go. So we went out there. They had some small acacia blanks. We took them home. We cut them up. We burned them. We cooked them on the stove. We boiled them. Try and come up with the smell. And Otis was convinced that's what it is. There's like 1,500 varieties of acacia wood, so getting the right one. The Ark of the Covenant was made of acacia wood. The table for the table of showbread was made of acacia wood. The walls were made out of acacia wood. They were covered with gold, but they were all made out of acacia wood. It would have been filled with this fragrance of acacia wood. The pillar may have been rolled over. It was. But God said, okay, I'm going to let them know it's still mine. I'm still there. The year of the fragrance. We still have that measure of presence. And I still hear, maybe every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I hear somebody come in the sanctuary and they say, boy, I smelled this today. I smelled that. Then I came across the Bob Jones prophecy. Bob Jones, the last prophetic word that he died in 2014. In January of 2014, he published the apple blossom vision. He had a vision of an apple blossom tree. Actually, Gary said he was with him when he had that vision. Gary tended to him for the last 7 years of his life and was with him the last 3 years, the 3 weeks of his lifespan. In December is when he had it. He saw the vision. And he explained, I see this apple tree in full bloom. And then God gave him an interpretation. It was published. You just do Bob Jones, apple blossom, you'll find it. It says this: while in a time of praise, Bob saw an apple tree in full bloom. As he prayed for understanding, and the Lord revealed to him that many people have been in the bud. They have been waiting on promises that go back many, many years. Now the Lord is saying that before the apple tree blooms this spring, 2014, their buds shall bloom. Although some of them are ancient promises, they will bloom in the spring before the apple tree does, and they will begin producing the fruit of righteousness. It was 2014, March the 4th, that the fragrance started in here. I believe it was God's stunning, definitive declaration. I have chosen this property. I have chosen this place. It's going to be a house of prayer. My presence is here. Contested, overruled. I understand now when I walked in the room, I said, this smells like applewood to me. Even though I said for about the next half hour, I don't know why I'm saying this, but this smells like applewood. This is strange. When several months later, when I was directed to this prophecy, I realized, God, that's why I said that. It's the same reason I said when that couple came to me so many years ago, can we come to this church? And I said, well, there's only 2 kinds of people that come here. And I wondered as I said that, what are the 2 kinds of people? It's called a word of knowledge, word of wisdom. When God gives you a word of knowledge on paper, you're telling what you don't know. And I wondered, okay, what are the 2 kinds of people? And so I listened real intently to hear what I said because I didn't know what I was about to say. And I said to them, well, people come here who love God, and people come here who want to love God. So if you fall in either of those 2 categories, you're welcome. It was a word of knowledge. God was just trying to say to me in stunning ways, I'm here. It's still on. March the 4th, the property, and Pastor Russ, the Doolittle forerunner, the impossible invitation, the USS Hornet, the boat that carried the Doolittle Raiders. They were the first offensive in the Pacific Theater after Pearl Harbor. Devastating. It's a long story, but eventually someone came up with the idea who was passing over an airfield, a submarine guy who was passing over an airfield that had an aircraft carrier painted on the runway on the ground. It's where Navy pilots learned to take off within the area that was available on an aircraft carrier. And as he thought, because they were trying to think, how can we attack Japan? What can we do? And he saw under his plane 2 Army bombers. Timing. He was up here. He saw 2 Army bombers pass over, and the shadow of those bombers passed over the painted aircraft carrier on the ground, the painted one. And the thought came to him, I wonder if Army bombers could be put on an aircraft carrier and launched and go after Japan that way, because Russia wouldn't let them take off from Russia. China wouldn't let them take off from China. That meant boat. It was so far from any place else. And that's how the idea was conceived. There was a brand new aircraft carrier. Actually, it was the 8th aircraft carrier the United States produced, and it was released from Berth 8. It was released on its first mission. So it left Norfolk. When they left, all the sailors, everybody thought they were on their way to Hawaii. They went through the Panama Canal, went to San Diego, and they were getting whatever they were picking up at San Diego, and they thought they were going to Hawaii, and the orders were changed. It was all known from the beginning by very few people that, no, go up to San Francisco, you're going to pick up 16 Army bombers. Army bombers on a Navy aircraft carrier? They loaded those 16 on there. But the day it left Norfolk was March the 4th of that year. To some people, so. The presence is what's going to carry us. The Hornet carried those airplanes. When they got out to sea, then everybody on the boat, including all those Army pilots who had worked so hard to learn how to fly those planes, they learned our destination is Tokyo. We're going to go and bomb Japan. They risked everything for what they didn't know because of the certain risks involved. That's why I'm not telling you what the initial assignment is. Not that I believe your life is at risk. It's the mission that's at risk, not your life. In the Doolittle, it was their lives. It's the mission that I'm concerned about. It left Norfolk on March the 4th, the vessel that carried the Doolittle Raiders. 8th aircraft carrier vessel CV-8, and it came out of the 8th berth. The Israel assignment, 56 days we count. God counts. We count. All the time we count. So it started on the 4th, so that's day 1, so you just count. Boy, I know a really key day in the Israel assignment. Oh, a phenomenal day in the Israel assignment was April the 28th. Watch part 8 to get that one. April the 20th, it was 56 days. To some people, oh, okay, 56 days. To me, 56 days, that's incredible. In order for that lineup to take place when God, in my mind, is saying, okay, it's been challenged, what I've called you to has been challenged, I'm now going to trumpet. For it to occur on the 56th day, April the 28th, that linkage, that cross linkage, that's Doolittle, that's Israel, that's the Doolittle assignment. What is it that's going to change the whole course of things? It's the Doolittle assignment. It's awakening the sleeping giant. What's going to carry it? The presence. The Israel assignment, 56 days later, April the 28th, Mount says, 1 year plus the fragrances, I've touched that. Okay. Day 1 of the second year of fragrances was on Purim. Purim, the second year, and it continued. Purim, what was that? Well, it's Esther, the book of Esther. So, I don't know anything about that. We search the internet. I've got people in here who are better internet searchers than I, looking for churches, anything that has fragrance, the visitation of heaven's fragrances for that kind of time period. We cannot find a record of it. So we come to the conclusion, God did it. Because he was trying to say something about this building, property, congregation. He was trying to say, I picked it. This is my choice. Day 1. So we started studying the book of Esther. I don't know how many times I read the book of Esther. Never had spent any time with it. Esther 2:12 says this, each young woman's turn came to go to King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months' preparation, according to the regulations for the women, for thus were the days of their preparation, apportioned 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. They had a year of preparation with fragrances for their time with the king. Because of the Purim connection. I said, God, is that what you've been doing? Have you been visiting us with heaven's fragrances because you're preparing us for our time with the King? Is that what you're doing? What a clever way to let that be known. My goodness. And the lineup of days, there's a day. There's a sovereign God. We're not just a bottle bopping up and down on the sea. The congregation in preparation for his presence among us in this. It links to the Doolittle raid. The Hornet launched for the Doolittle raid on the 4th. Israel, 56 days. The Stunner, we're there on the Temple Mount on April 28th in the formation of Ezekiel's temple. On that day, and God says, remember, don't forget this. It's 56. That's the number for the assignment. Stunning ways. These were happening among us. They're your stories. Israel, the congregation, Pastor Russ, Sunday, July the 12th. Jason Gillerin. I've told that story where the tent peg that had been given to me and the prophecy that had come after the 4 videos that impacted my life. You'll have to see earlier videos. And the Sunday morning, C.J. Olivio now had made a tent peg, had seen it, and had Cyrus, Isaiah 45 written on it. And we were going to drive it out on the ground as a stake. That's all we had. We were going to put it in the ground. Jason Gillerin comes to me that morning that I knew what I was going to do. And he comes to me with this train whistle. You're hearing the sound of the train. He's going to be involved in the building of a building, the temple, the rebuilding of the temple. What I didn't understand at that time, how much it still involved also Russia. I did not have that in my thinking at that time. And when he gave it to me, what I didn't say in the other time period, he gave it to me and told me how many times he thought about giving it to me. I opened it up. What is it? It's a whistle. I blew it. It was a Kenyan train whistle. He went home and researched. He called me that afternoon and he said, you know, Pastor Russ, that it was 7 years to the day when I got back to the States that I could have given you that whistle, that I delayed 7 years to the day. There's a day. What are we waiting for? The day. We're waiting for the day. We're always waiting for the day. There is a day. Then what happened on July the 12th, 2015, is I found that whistle. I thought it was lost. I had looked in the cupboard in my office. I have a corner cupboard. Please don't look in it. It's a phlegmatics cupboard, so you just don't look in it. You probably understand why I couldn't find anything in it. I've looked in there before. I've reached around where I thought I'd put that thing for sure. I thought, well, through the years, this was in 2006, so we're now in 2015. For years, I know I got it out. I said, I'll bet I took it home. I looked at my stuff at home. I looked in my drawers at the house. They were phlegmatic drawers. I have a box on top of my bureau that drives Faye crazy. It's a phlegmatics box. And I looked through all that stuff, and there's no whistle. I was sure it's gone. I've lost it. How could I have lost it? How could I have? And that Sunday, before I went on vacation, this date, July the 12th, 2015, I go back down to my office and I look again. I open the door, I look again. I've searched it before. I searched everywhere in that place. I couldn't find it. I said, I'm going to look again. So I look again, and there it is. I find it. It's like, oh my goodness. The whistle. So I bring it upstairs, and I had put in the notes the Jamie Galloway prophecy, and I walked in behind Len and Edith. You haven't been here in months. And when I was telling the story and I brought the whistle out and told the story of Jamie Galloway, they were sitting beside me when I got that prophecy. That day in Texas Roadhouse, when Jamie Galloway prophesied that to me in 2006, Len was sitting right next to me and Edith next to him. It's like God gave confirming people in the room when I told it in 2015. The people who were sitting next to me. I took the whistle out and, just because of conversations, I knew Jason Gillerin won't be here. And I asked, Jason, are you here? Yeah, I'm here. Something like that. It's like unbelievable. I heard somebody up close to the front say, did you notice that they're both here? God was confirming that the deal is still on, the calling is still on, the assignment is still on. There always has been an assignment, though it's taken God years to bring us to the place where we could begin accepting it. And He had to rearrange, and people chose to go, had to go, were called to other things. How all this came into being on Wednesday, that was on Sunday, July the 12th. On Wednesday, we went on vacation on Thursday in a prayer group here, and someone asked, what's the significance of the whistle? And it's like, what is the significance of the whistle? Oh my goodness. And I realize I have done a terrible job. Everybody in here ought to know the significance of the sound of the train, but that's my job to tell those stories over and over and over and over again. And I made a decision when I come back from vacation, first message I'm going to give is I'm going to tell the story of the whistle, the sound of the train. That's how I left that prayer meeting that day and then stepped into vacation. Decision to tell that story upon return from vacation. We're in 2015. Pardon? Did I go too far? Yeah. So, decision to tell the story. And the Culvers on vacation. Faye had, on several different times, wondered, our good friends, the Culvers, who were here at the very beginning of New Covenant, that
have lived their work life in Mississippi. And again, she said, I wonder if the Culvers would join us on the houseboat. We rent a houseboat. We're sort of adventuresome. We keep it tied up at the dock, so we're not real adventuresome, but it floats, you understand, and it's nice. It's wonderful. And they said yes. I was really surprised. And they came the second week, and it was just the Culvers and Faye and I for the second week. We had a lot of people the first week. And the second week, it was the Culvers, and they asked pretty early on about, well, what's going on at New Covenant? What are the stories? You want to hear the stories? I love to tell the stories. So over the next 3 days, I told all the stories. I was so excited. They were enthralled. They were encouraged. I was zooming. Because it's been years since I went through it chronologically. And it was then that I made the decision, I'm going to tell all the stories. I'm going to do a Sunday night series on the prophetic history and calling of NCF. That's what I'm going to do. And in the midst of that, I realized, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. In the Doolittle, what launches it. That's impossible. That is impossible. Anybody who hears that's going to say, I don't even think Jesus did that. That's impossible. Sunday, August the 9th, the first part of the congregation. What about the congregation? What stunning sign did God give that was congregation focused? The property focused, me in my own calling, the property that houses what about the congregation? Sunday, August the 9th, 2015. I make the decision, though I had made the decision on vacation, I'm going to do this on Sunday nights, but I struggled so when I came back. Michael Rich, we had already made those plans. He was going to speak the first Sunday I was back. And during that week, as I was studying and putting notes and putting all the things together, just beginning that journey, that's been very consuming over these past 9 weeks. I came to realize I'm going to give this on Sunday morning because it was about the November 1st, 1981, the Bob Jones prophecy, the enlistment. That's us. I need to say that to everybody. So I made the decision I was going to do that morning. So Sunday, August the 9th, 2015, first part of the prophetic history and calling of NCF, and I told the Sands of Time story, called from day one into the end-time army of God. From day one, we were called into the end-time army of God. Day one, none of us realized it. We were just starting a church. Stunning confirmation number one, the Elijah list. The next day, I start getting texts, emails, phone calls. Pastor Russ, you know what was put up on Elijah list today? No, I don't get the Elijah list. What was on the Elijah list? The Bob Jones prophecy, the Sands of Time prophecy. It's on tape part 1. The Elijah list replayed it today, the next day after. Well, okay, that's not significant. It's 34 years after it was given, and it's the next day. God counts. He knows what day it is. This is your story. This was the congregation. It's not me, it's the congregation. That's unbelievable. I got texts, emails, as I said, phone calls. I had somebody come up to me. It was all honoring. Why did you choose that day to start the prophetic history? Do you understand? It was because of the Sunday before, because of the question about why the significance of the sound of the train. It was because of the vacation and the Culvers. It was because of telling all those stories. It was because we'd already made plans that Michael would speak the first Sunday that I was back, and so I had the next Sunday. So that's how it was chosen. There wasn't any design, there wasn't any knowing that they're going to post something that's been dormant for 34 years. They just kind of looked at me like, still don't know why you started on that day. Because it was God. That's why. Because there's a bigger hand that's directing us. There's a bigger hand that's saying, this is my property. There's a bigger hand that's saying, I called you into being, I'm now confirming it. After it's been challenged. There was a much bigger hand saying, I called you and I'm not done. The deal is still on. Russ, get with it. You may have all the reasons why I'm disqualified. Open heart surgery, I fell on my head, struggles with children. I'm disqualified. I called you. I haven't removed you. As a matter of fact, I've sovereignly saved you. Keep going. Stunning confirmation number 2. Found out that the week before I gave that message, Bonnie Jones had an hourglass vision. And she related it to the sands of time vision that her husband had 34 years ago. And she posted them on her website. And Elijah List picked them up and posted them on Elijah List, a much wider distribution, on the Monday after the Sunday that we started this series. That's how it got there. And in her confirmation, the hourglass, she talked about however many years it has been, and that generation that started on November the 1st, 1981, that they're now stepping into, its time has begun. That's us. That is us. That's you. And then Jim Oxendine came, and I discovered there was, pardon? Do I have a train at the bottom? Yeah, okay, I think I have it on this one. Stunning confirmation, the Elijah List, 36, it was 36 years. Stunning confirmation number 2, Bonnie Jones retelling Sands of Time and her hourglass vision and the train. So she's sitting outside of her house. Gary has been there. He was with Bob a lot. He said, oh yeah, there's this train intersection that's right beside their house. She's sitting out on her back porch area, and she's doing a very simplistic, probably had an iPad or an iPhone, or I think she'll actually use an Android. She was using an Android, I'm sure. And she did this little video that she was going to post, which she was telling about the sands of time of Bob and the hourglass vision that she said was at the sands of time, and she saw it turn over and realized that it's begun. That's what she heard in her spirit. It has begun. That's us. And right after she says, and the army of God, there's a train in the background. The first time I heard that, I thought, I turned it off. I was at my house. I turned the computer off because you occasionally can hear a train from our house. And there wasn't any train. I turned it back on. The train was there. I turned it off, turned it back on. That train is on that tape. That's impossible. But it's right there. It was a 20-cent stamp. That when stamps went to 20 cents in the United States, that's when the first induction notices would be sent out. That happened when it was law that you had to use a 20-cent stamp, was November the 1st, 1981. I timed. How long was the train whistle on that thing? It was 20 seconds. What was the time code? It was 3:36 to 3:56. Do you think that God is that involved in our lives that He will so orchestrate the words that someone's speaking with the passing of a train, with the time schedule. So people who 56 means something to, that 20 seconds means something to, those whistles go from 15 to 20 plus because they're arbitrary. It's not a machine. It's the pulling of the thing by the engineers. Do you know what kind of orchestration it takes to get that to be exact? Yep. It's your story. We played it on Sunday morning, Jim Oxendine, trying to encourage him. The untimely death of his son, tried to encourage him. All the things you're doing, it's because you're from this place. And we've been called to have a leadership role in the end-time global harvest. And in the Doolittle assignment, it's launching it. And it's going to start in Russia. And I can't deal with the why because God chose it. And he screamed at us, the property, still mine, still belongs to me. The congregation, still viable. The pastor, still alive. The assignments, the two big ones facing us, Russia and Israel, still going. They're all interconnected. So on that Sunday morning, stunning confirmation number 3, the actual train whistle. I'd studied train whistles. Why I never paid attention to what we hear. We didn't know we were building beside a train track really, and how much this train would go by, and how many times it just seemed like right at the moment when a dynamic point, maybe every 50 messages I had a dynamic point, the train would come by, and just the right moment. And we say, you hear the sound of the train? We take that as confirmation. The sound of the train, God saying, this is me, pay attention. That's what happened when Jason Gilleran handed. You are hearing the sound of the train. When you cite that Jamie Galloway prophecy, when you drive the stake, you are hearing the sound of the train. That's how I interpreted it. So when they approach an intersection, they have 4 sounds. They do a long, and a short, and a long. So Bobby leaves in the congregation that Sunday morning, and so somehow the idea comes to her, looks up on Morse code what long, long, short, long means. Never thought of it. And so she speaks up and says, that's the letter Q in Morse code. It's the letter Q? So then if it were a dream, and somebody said that in a dream, you would search out Q. Well, it happens in real life. Life is like a dream. So interpret it the same way you would try interpret a dream. It has meaning. It was dramatic. It was in front of everybody. It's for us. The actual train whistle and the cue. So now I listen to it every time the train goes by in this intersection. You can hear them long, long, short, long. So Pastor Russ in Russia, December 2013. One of Bob Jones' last prophecies. He died in 2014. Gary was with him. He said, to his knowledge, he didn't know of any other personal prophecies that Bob gave in those last weeks of his life. He said he may have. It was certainly one of the last. And it told me it could be the last prophecy, personal prophecy that Bob gave. He asked, how's that, Pastor Russ? And he understood, he knew that the relationship that Gary and I have. And Gary spoke to him. So this is December 2013. And said, tell him to pack his suitcases, plural. He's going back to Russia. I remember when Gary came and told me that. That wasn't good news. I didn't have Russia on my mind. As far as I was concerned, everything we'd done in Russia, we'd done. At that time, that wasn't good news. I'm on my way to Israel. We're becoming a house of prayer, the presence of God. That's who we are. That's what we're becoming. And I just don't have... And all that time, I misinterpreted. I had the Doolittle assignment. I just misinterpreted it. And the seed, God used us to put the prophetic seed in the ground. He used this little congregation in East Tennessee. It's all over the former Soviet Union. It's been growing and growing and growing. Because of that, I understand why he's saying, now go, call it forth. Awaken it. It makes sense. I just put that on the shelf. I'm just not thinking about Russia. September 23rd, 2015 was Yom Kippur, the return of the bottom third of my stick. The match, it matched. I showed you last week, I told that story. Well, that's where we took the stick and tunked it down where supposedly St. Andrews said the light of the gospel is going to start here and it's going to go all over the whole world. It's going to begin in Ukraine. Bob Jones said in the prophetic tape that he did, that we recorded, it's going to start in Ukraine. I couldn't believe it. The return of the critical portion of that stick was the third verse. And the piece that I had fit to it. It was unbelievable. It was the return of the assignment. The Russia assignment. That stick had to do with Russia, Ukraine. It was the sovereign return. It was unbelievable. It happened. It was on Yom Kippur, a day of fasting. When Jesus dealt with the devil, he fasted 40 days because he was contending with the devil. That's why we're doing 40 days, because this is going to be contended. It has been contended in major ways, and God has lifted us up. This has just happened just days ago. Russ Dunn, the Mandy Doolittle, the Bob Jones prophecy, the apple blossom, I could have put the stick. The property, the year of the fragrance here. The congregation, sands of time, the queue, we're waiting on the queue. All that's taken place. Russia, the second stick section returned, the Bob Jones prophecy. Israel, the year of fragrance, plus the 56 days from March, and the number 56 and the meaning that it has. In looking back over all this, over these 9 weeks, and I have spent untold hours going back through records and files and journals and what have you. Talk to people. Make sure of my facts and information. It's enabled me to step back and say, okay, now we're going to look at this as a whole, that there was intentionality from day one and progressively revealed. Intentionality, day one. I believe you have the opportunity to have the opportunity of a lifetime to participate in awakening the sleeping giant Russia unto its end-time calling, the launch of the global end-time harvest. That's a big deal. And the stories that I have been telling you over the past 9 weeks communicate to me it's a big deal. Is it hype? I hope not. That's why I'm telling you the stories. That's why we're videoing them, so you can look at them again and again. You can ask your questions. So, the Awaken Outreach. If you're going to go with us on this first one, then you will have to participate in 40 days of prayer and fasting. We're doing a 40-day now. We're not saying you have to do this exact 40 days. In the 40 days that it's taking place, you have to pray and fast 40 days. My encouragement is to make it as much on Yom Kippur, which the stick was returned to me, the bottom third of the stick was returned to me on Yom Kippur. It was a day of total fasting. I'm not suggesting, I'm not doing a total fast. That's no food, no liquid. I'm doing a juice fast. But consider fasting everything that you can that interferes with your spiritual sensitivity. Every aspect of your life, every one of your activities that minimizes or limits or takes away from the maximum spiritual sensitivity that you can. Yes, I am asking you to do that. I realize because of job demands and physical health and all those kinds of things, people have to do it differently. It's our calling. You'll be rewarded for it in heaven. Please participate as fully as you can. Whether you go or stay or are part of the intercessory team here, it'd be awful if that took place right around me and I was never a part. That would be awful. You'll have to see all the NCF prophetic history videos. They're out on the web. This one will be added this week. Then they'll all be out there. We have 10 copies of the Bondage Breaker DVDs. You have to watch there's 3 of them. The 3 DVDs, I think there's 9 lessons, 8 lessons. They're about 45 minutes each. Then pray through the 7 steps with someone. Get them. Start. Your passport. You'll need a passport. Now's the time to start. A lot of intercession, a lot of prayer in the Spirit, a lot of waiting for the now, Q. What we're called to do is not something you just launch out on your own and say, okay, now's a good time to do this. No, there's a day. There's a day, so you wait for the cue. God said to that. He screamed that to us as far as I'm concerned. Corporately among us, you wait for the day. Ooh, how long will that be? I don't know. Faye and I are taking a trip Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's directly related to the outreach. It's here in this country. Though Awakening the Sleeping Giant will take place in Russia. It's like Gideon's and like Doolittle's team. None of those men on Gideon's team had ever done that before. None of them. I guarantee not one of them had fought a battle. Neither had Gideon led a people to that kind of battle. None of them had. The day they stood on the rim of that canyon and overlooked the 130-some thousand enemy, and there was only 300 of them. But they had a shofar and a torch and a clay pitcher. They were well armed. That could be how we will feel when we stand at the place in which we will awaken the sleeping giant. All we got is a trumpet, some light, something to make a little bit of noise. I haven't said that's what we'll be carrying. I have said that's what it'll seem like. The Doolittle Raiders, they worked like crazy to prepare. They had no idea where they were going. They had no idea why they were learning how to fly Army bombers that were full of gasoline and had 4 500-pound bombs. And they were taking off in this unearthly space, and they were told they were going to take off from a carrier. And Army bombers don't take off from aircraft carriers. They require 2,000 feet. At best, it's 500 feet. And that's stretching it. It ended up being more like 450 feet. All of them said at the beginning, it can't be done, it can't be done. Where are we going? We can't tell you. You can't even talk about it among yourselves. If you do, you're out of here. They found out when they were on the Hornet and passed out to sea. Gentlemen, we're on our way to Japan. That was the Doolittle Raiders. So that's my intention. Those who are going, that's when you'll find out. The 300 were already chosen, and they were at some level on their way. They were at the armory where they were being handed the weapons, whatever they were handed. You're making it very hard. I'm trying to protect the assignment. There's no way for me to describe the delight this has been. I've had the privilege of living this. I am such a rich man. I don't have a lot of money, but I have experiences with God, and I have stories that, yes, people can interpret them differently, but they have to interpret them. They're facts that happened in almost every instance. Not everyone, but almost. They're facts that happened. It's been an analytical person's, it's just been a wonder garden, feasting on the works of God, watching a sovereign God convince someone in stunning and unmistakable ways that there is a sovereign God. And He's beckoned you, and He's beckoned us. I have a journey I would like to include you on. You want to come? Some have said no. I think sadly all they'll get to do is sit at your campfire in heaven and listen to you tell the story again. Okay, let me tell you about when we woke up the sleeping giant Russia. Let me tell you about it. And hear them say, you know, I could have been there. Well, we won't have memory. I'm not sure about that. Let's say for the first 1,000 years of the millennium. I do know they have memory there. You're really trying to influence me? Yes. Yes. Let's just pray in the Spirit a minute. Lord, we cover this. Ola la catario la levedidi bocoshotorio la levedidi bush. Yala la catario la levedidi bushotorio la levedidi budorivo la levedidi bus. Ola la cotorio la levedidi bushotorio la levedidi budorivo la levedidi bus. Yandore bushotorio la levedidi budorivo la levedidi bus. We will accomplish what you enable us to accomplish, what you grant us grace to do. We will do it. Thank you for everybody in the room. Thank you for everybody who takes the time to watch these things. And I bless them in Jesus' name. Thank you for your story, Father. In the name of Jesus Christ, the risen one, I pray. And everybody said, amen. Thank you. Grace to you.